Great, so thanks all for coming to this session. I really appreciate it. I'm Kristen Ferrara, and like you shared, Head of Scientific Informatics. What does that mean? So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I do work for Takeda Pharmaceuticals, which is actually based here in Cambridge. We have locations all over the world. Japanese pharmaceutical company that started 240 plus years ago. And I've been with that company for over 25 years. But I actually started out as a bench scientist. So I studied really neuroscience, a little bit of cellular biology when I was at university. And that's where I started my career. And I just loved taking data and analyzing it. That was sort of my fun space. But back then, because I'm kind of old, back then, that was like on Excel spreadsheets. And it really, really wasn't that exciting. So my team actually, as a biologist, my job was to run screens, do assays, tests, however you want to call them, experiments. And that generated data. But I was very fortunate at the beginning of my career that the start of automation in R&D, I'll say, was just getting started. And so there was a small group of us who said, well, we're not afraid of code. We're not afraid of software. We're not afraid of robots. So we'll try to figure out from the scientist perspective how to build more high throughput capabilities in the lab. So instead of me sitting there all day going like this, I could sort of program a robot and have it do work. And so we wound up building systems that were half the size of this room, and a big track base, a nice cute robotic arm that went around and acted like the scientist moving around. That was all great, except it generated a lot more data faster. And so now we had this trouble where we're generating tons and tons of data, but we are still crunching it in Excel, right? So the software companies came along, figured that value proposition out, and that business development started creating scientific software. And so what happened with me is I stayed in the automation trend, stayed in the informatics space, and wound up in an IT space. So now what do? I actually run a global IT division. But remember, I'm a scientist, right? So I don't write code other than that robotic code I wrote 25 years ago. So my team is actually the IT team that supports R&D, so really research, the R part of research. So that's research, pharmaceutical sciences, cell therapies, gene therapies, and all the software, scientific software that those scientists need to do their jobs. And I mention that because of the tie to the data science and to the AI. And so over time at Takeda, what we've done is we went through a major transformation at Takeda to think about how we do R&D at Takeda. That then led to, there was a giant integration at Takeda. And during that integration, when Takeda and Shire integrated two pharmaceutical companies, we needed to then go from being site-based and have site-based solutions, site-based data warehousing, data practices that were in a location, like in a Boston location that was focused on oncology. And we really need to think, how can Takeda work globally? So I could have a researcher in Boston who's working on a program that might leverage some of the skill we have in the scientific community and data in Japan, for example. And so my team's job at that point in time was to create global platforms that could then be used no matter where you were. So you're a scientist in Japan, you want to see the data of the co-scientist in Boston that you're working with. That was my team's value propositions. We're going to bring that capability to you. And so we did that. And then we did this journey to the cloud. And this all happened in the span of 4 years, which was a pretty short amount of time to integrate 240 years of research at Takeda, but we did it. And then we moved a lot of our data warehouses and databases to the cloud. Now, why am I telling this room any of this information? There's a reason. So let me see if I can get to the next slide. It's because now we've completed all of those foundational steps at our company. So really any company, if you can complete those types of steps of having platforms versus independent tools, if you can get your capabilities or your data to a cloud, we happen to use AWS, you can then connect the data. And until you use tools that allow you to connect data, you really can't. And you can't solve the, I want to see that guy's data problem. And so now at Takeda, we have put all of our data up into the cloud at AWS. So what? It's there, but who cares? What can we do with it, right? So now we have the next step, and that's creating this R&D data strategy. And AI is a big part of that. As a matter of fact, there are some folks that I'm working on this with in the business, so inside the research, the scientists, and they're saying, well, our whole R&D data strategy is AI. I say, okay, well, AI can be a component of that, but there are other pieces to this data strategy. Because you really have to think of, you have all this data now, we have it up in the cloud, but how do we get it together? Who wants to see it? How do they want to see it? When do they want to see it? And what do they want to look like when they get it, right? So in data science, we solve some of those problems for folks, right? They give us a whole bunch of data, and we create these visualizations they can make inferences from, or we provide inferences to them. But if you can't get access to the data, you don't have enough big enough data set or a rich enough data set to drive those insights. And so what we're doing right now is we're thinking about the data as a persona. And so if you think about the journey a scientist takes, or the journey an asset takes, and that asset can be something at Takeda, or it could also be a product you have if you're a software company. It could also be a widget in a widget factory. What is the journey of that from start to beginning? Start to end. And so if you think about data that way, you think about, well, what is the data, what do I need the data to do? Where do I need it to be? And when do I need it to be there? That journey itself actually helps think about the technology piece we have to put on top on how to connect the data. You can connect things all you want in a bubble, but you're going to go sit with the scientists, and they're going to say, great, but I really wanted that information over there, right? And you hadn't done that because you didn't ask them. So you really have to work very closely with your stakeholder, in this case at Takeda, that is a scientist, and ask them, what scientific questions are they trying to ask? This is a hard concept. It actually is a harder question than one would think. We started asking this question recently because now we have all this data in the cloud. They're used to not being able to access the data because it's someplace that they can't get to it. We're saying now, great, assume we've solved that problem. We haven't solved it completely, but let's start there. Let's start with, you can have access to any data you think you need. What are you going to do with it? And that actually created quite a pause for many of the scientists because they've never been presented with that opportunity before. They're presented with, here's a data set we can get you. We'll look at it, make inferences from it, but we don't have the whole story. And in the research space or the R&D space, you really need to look at the whole story to really drive a pretty good value statement at the end. Looking at subsets of data gets you on the pathway. But to get it to a regulatory agency and get them to allow you to put that into a human or larger animals, you really have to have a really good, full, rich story. And we've talked about that in some of the conversations. So this has really helped us think about what data do the scientists need and putting that together. So we look at that data story. Then my IT team, for example, working with those scientists, can then say, great, okay, that's the data that you would like access to. Let me technically figure that out for you, right? You guys don't have to worry, the scientists don't have to worry about where the data is anymore. What we're going to try to do is surface the data to them. And so this is where we sort of realize that there are great results hidden in plain sight. So we have a couple of different things that go on. So let's take an example, okay? So some of you have presented over the last day and a half, right? And some of you still be presenting later on today. You have a great presentation. I've seen amazing presentations. I've seen great insights. We've shared great insights with each other over the past day and a half. You've come from work where earlier, maybe on Monday, you had a meeting where you sat in a meeting with, say, 20 people, and someone provided some great insight about a problem your company is trying to solve. This is excellent. So now you're going to continue on that pathway. Where are you all going to put your presentations? So we're going to do a raising hand exercise. For anybody who's done a presentation in the last month. Who has put that presentation, that PowerPoint slide you had to show your manager, something you had to use or even here? How many of you put it on the hard drive of your computer? Yeah, that's very typical, yeah. How many of you put it on a file share owned by your company or your school? Great. How many of you put it up in the cloud? Because that's the file share, where the file shares are sitting for your companies now. So yeah, so the hard drive folks, hey guys, don't do that anymore. Can you put it someplace, store it someplace in the future? Here's why. The scientists do the same thing. So yes, while we're in that project, or while we're looking at that asset, right, that drug we're trying to bring to market, and this is really early on, R&D. So we're talking about a molecule, right, that has a name that has the letter T in front of it and like 8 numbers, right? And then we give it a nickname. We just name it the last 4 numbers. And then that's part of a program. And that program has a cute name that somebody came up with that has something to do with the target or the disease we're trying to solve. And they create a nice folder in their department file share. And that folder has the name of the program and has maybe some characteristics to it. And they take that presentation and they slide it right underneath that folder. That's great for as long as that program is running. People know the information. But as soon as that program stops, which happens a lot in R&D, or people move on to the next phase of that program, no one ever sees that insight, that information, the value statement, the gem that you created earlier on. And 6 months from now, people move jobs, you change, we get busy, we're working on multiple programs at the same time. No one even remembers that presentation held that great insight. They'll remember that great insight came, but they won't remember where the presentation is or that presentation exists. So now imagine, this table's working on a program and this table's working on a program. And so this table sort of is a little bit ahead, and they've completed their program and lovely put right in the file share where they're supposed to, because that's what everybody agreed on. And then a year later, this team is looking at maybe a similar disease target, something. Guess what? We don't know this, but what they found is going to help you get to your insight faster, or at least get you to maybe even move the product along, whether it's a product or let's say a molecule, move it along the R&D pipeline faster. Except you guys don't know them because you work in a 50,000 person company, they're in Austria, and you guys are in Boston. You have no idea that they've come up with an insight that's going to help drive your team. And this is the big problem we have, is that there is great data everywhere in your companies, no matter what your company does. Your company could be 6 months old. There's still valuable information that came. Your company could be 240 years old. And just imagine all the rich information that we could have to drive insights faster. And the value proposition of a pharmaceutical company, right, is to bring better medicines to patients faster. We all have our own sort of what we'll call we do, right? A different pharmaceutical company is going to have a different sort of motto, if you will, or a driver or vision. But generally, don't we all want better medicines, and we'd like to get them there faster, right? So in general, so in order to do that, it would be more valuable, and this is sort of part of the data science proposition, right? An AI proposition is, how can we do this more efficiently? How can we get this information more quickly so we can get to decisions faster? So same here. So what we have to do is try to bring the data, the information, the knowledge, the insights to the top of the haystack. Bring that needle to the top. And we've tried different things over the years. I think all of us have been through it, and no matter what industry you're in, where you say to the team, okay, everyone in the room, from now on, you're all going to name every presentation you make with the name of the program, your last name, and the date, right? And we think that's going to solve it. We'll be able to find everything from there. Except 6 months from now, we actually go and acquire that room next door, right? They haven't heard our little harmonization plan, but they do it differently because they're a different company, they're a different group. And we can't convince them to name it that way because they don't agree. So for as long as I have been working, we have been trying this thing of get people to harmonize on the way they store their data. And it never works. And it really never, ever works in research. Because research needs that level of agility. You can't constrain research. If you do, you will not be doing valuable research anymore. But we have tried. We've tried to use systems. We've tried to use technology. We've tried to use the managers being mean. None of that works, right? So instead of that, because we're all moving to the cloud for the most part, because our data is more sort of technically accessible, and we have technologies today, let's look at this problem in a different way. So we know we've all created great insights. We've put them wherever we've put them. They've put them in their folder. You guys put them in your folder. We've named them this way over here, and they've named it a different way over there. Maybe who cares? Maybe we allow for that. Maybe we stop trying to constrain that, but instead we use technology to go find it and bring it. And I say that because when I go and talk to a scientist and say, hey, what kind of data do you need? When do you need it? How would you need it? What they say is, I just want to go to one place, and I want all my insights brought to me. And I have this little theory that what created that, because in the past people sort of dealt with trying to go find it. And so we don't really have time anymore, like Thomas Edison, to go examine straw after straw after straw. We move too fast now the way we work. And also, we don't have a culture that allows for going to find stuff. We want it right away. We need immediate, right? And we all have jobs to do to drive insights. In a pharmaceutical company, we're trying to get the better medicines to patients faster. So I don't have time to say, hold on, let me take 6 months and go try to find stuff. It's not going to happen. I think it's the smartphone that created sort of this habit, right? So if you think about your smartphone, I don't care which one you have, and you look at it. At the same time, you can look up the weather, text your mom, and email work, all in the front face. That is why I suspect that for me, the scientists I'm speaking with are saying, no, I just want it one place, because that is the lifestyle we have outside of work. Everything we need is in one place. It really is. And we're even training our grandparents and our nieces and nephews and our children to be like that, right? So our society coming up is used to get it to me fast. I just want to press one button, and I just want it here all the time. So we need to, I think, transition so we can do that. I don't know how to do that yet, by the way. This is actually the big, and this is no longer working for me. Let me try one more time. There we go. Turned it off and on. Shocking. So this is I think this right now is the R&D data strategy for me, is to bring all the data to the surface as much as I can. Make it findable, right? And why am I telling a bunch of folks in an AI conference any of this information? It's because, again, you are all creating high-value information for your company, no matter what you're doing. And that information deserves another chance. It deserves a secondary use, not only its primary use, but likely it will also help another decision years later. And so how can we bring that so it's easier and more accessible and findable? And so let's say we solve that problem. Let's say 3 years from now, we're all back here in this room, and I can get up here and say, this is how we solve this problem, right? So I don't know how long it'll take. I think I'm told to make that happen faster. So there are ways that we're looking into that. So maybe it's a couple years, and we're back here in this room. That's wonderful, except we have this little problem where people are afraid of sharing data. So I've been in this space for 25 plus years. And when I first started as a new scientist, it was the same, hide and protect your data. Don't let anybody see it. Same way we used to take test exams, right? You would cover your paper and write down because you didn't want the kid next to you that didn't study stealing your answers. That's how science was too. Hide and protect, because you were protecting intellectual property for your company. You were afraid that the company next door was going to steal your information and get to market faster with that product. There has been a change in the industry, in R&D and pharmaceuticals, if you'll believe me, there is. We no longer are trying to hide and protect. Instead, there's a community of, oh, wait, whoever gets it there faster to the patient, that's good for society. Why would we want to block somebody doing better work and getting into a patient faster? And so we've seen the pharmaceutical industry shift and change over the past, say, 25 years to a more data sharing, collaboration, external collaboration work. And maybe some of you are involved in that. So especially if you're sort of pulling data from large communities like a UK biobank or some kind of biobanks or some sort of big data, right, that source that we're all going to, right? We're all going to the same data sources in pharma, especially in the Boston area. And so we're sharing data now. And with that, you have to share it externally. And there are a lot of folks, I've actually talked to quite a few people over the last day and a half, where they have these companies that have great value propositions on how to encrypt that data as it's going from place to place. So you can assure that security that you need. Or internally, how do you assure that the right people are seeing data that should see it? So we can technically protect. A lot of you have that capability. A lot of software out there, you're developing it. So technically, but what we actually have as well is the culture problem. So I've been hiding my data from everybody for 30 years at my job. It's how are you going to build my trust now with some technology that you tell me this company's wonderful, trust me, they're great, our data's fine, you can share your data now, to just not even externally, but internally. And so there has to be sort of this, and this gets a little emotionally intelligent, but there has to be a culture change as well inside different corporations in order to open up the idea of sharing is okay. Because in sharing that information, you're going to have more people looking at it, and you can drive better insights as well. And that way we can get that medicine to the patient faster. And so the external sharing is actually less difficult than internal. There's more of a culture of sharing data externally to these big data warehouses where everybody can go grab from them and run insights, run tests. It's the internal culture that is actually that's another roadblock we have. So it's actually part of our R&D data strategy and AI strategy is to even perhaps leverage some AI and sort of show, like, look at the benefit you get when you share data. Look at all the information we can gather. Look at how we can quickly model that information to get you a better insight faster. So some of the strategy is to sort of build that trust internally, is to show the technologies in action, and AI is a big piece of that. So that's sort of what we're working on. That's what we're driving towards. It's a problem we all have, but this comes up quite a bit even in R&D or across Takeda. The question of where should the community that's driving AI sit? Who should they report to, right? We'll keep it simple. And there's this debate of like, well, you should have a central organization that's focused on innovative technologies and AI as a part of their value proposition, and they run across the whole company and they perform AI for everybody, right? That's one way of thinking. Another way of thinking is embed them into the different teams. So you have somebody sitting with your commercial team that's skilled in the arts of AI. You have somebody sitting in the research team that's skilled in the arts there, right? That way they have a little closer connection to the questions the scientists are trying to answer, at least in a pharmaceutical company, or like the commercial marketing guys, HR folks, all of these different types of groups. What I'm going to propose here or theorize is that it doesn't matter. What I would recommend instead is just create a community of practice that's cross-functional. You can avoid all the workday and HR complications of who should report to who and who owns the data. We have this sort of own the data problem. And so what we actually have kicked this off at Takeda. I'll let you know how it goes in a year, where we have a community of practice together. So that brings in all these experts that are running these different AI models, if you will, or experiments in innovative technologies, and then sharing with each other that allows them to kind of sit wherever they need to sit to do that work more closely with the scientists. So it's just a little piece there. So that ends my presentation. I really look forward to, if anybody wants to grab me, love to talk more, bang at my theories, suggest something different, tell me, yes, you're having the same problem and you actually work for a company that makes widgets. I think it's the talking together is almost like bringing all that data together and allowing us to get to insights faster together. Thank you.